Alrighty, good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to Art and Practice. We're delighted to have you with us this evening for In Conversation with Yolande Daniels and Zion Estrada. Yes, you can clap it up. There we are. All right. The work of multidisciplinary artist Yolande Daniels explores the fraught relationship between race, power, and time, as well as how these concepts shape the built environment. Her first solo exhibition, to a future space-time, which just opened this past weekend across the street at the exhibition space. If you haven't had a chance yet, we hope you'll get to see it soon. Guides visitors through a fluid mapping of the ways Black people have created their own space-time coordinates, their own measures of distance, and their own cartographic possibilities without negotiating with the colonizer, without customs or a clock. Tonight, exhibition curator Zion Estrada, an interdisciplinary artist, researcher, and founder of Black Discourse, and Daniels will discuss the formation of this exhibition. Yolande Daniels is a co-founding design principal of Studio Sumo, an associate professor of architecture at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and a founding board member of the Black Reconstruction Collective. Daniels' work includes building designs, interiors, exhibitions, writing, and design research that has been published and exhibited in cities including New York, Tokyo, Rome, and Venice. Daniels is a National Academician, a Rome Prize Fellow in Architecture, and a Fellow in the Independent Study Program of the Whitney Museum of American Art in Studio Practice and Cultural Studies, among many other lovely accomplishments. Zion Estrada is an interdisciplinary artist and researcher. Her work flows between the archival, assemblage, filmmaking, sonic collage production, and experimental design, centering human and more than human reconnection. Her experimental films have been exhibited at the 2023 Chicago Architectural Biennale and the 2024 Rockaway Film Festival and other venues. She is a selected exhibitor at the 2024 Ghetto Biennale in Jacmel, Haiti, and participated in the 2023 MIT Worlding Project. She founded Black Discourse, which curated the traveling exhibition Monument. Without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to the conversationalist. Thank you.
Is it working? Thank you so much. Hey, y'all. Just grateful that you're here with us. I think I pressed play on the music. No. I want to ground us in a quote from Yolande that also helped us create the framework for this curation, and I also think will be supportive as we kind of stay in conversation with each other. So she says, diasporic experiences of time support the reconceptualization of temporality beyond linear time. In the theory of relativity, temporality is experienced simultaneously at different locations through multiple perspectives on multiple planes. The idea that multiple perspectives may exist on a single plane resonates for me as part of the Black transatlantic experience. I've had such a good time with you. This has been over a year in the making, so we're also very grateful to Cam and Art and Practice for being a partner and exhibiting Yolande's work. This is her first solo show, and I want to name part of the experience that I've had as a curator and the respect that I have for her as an artist is that Black femme artists have a miraculous way of taking abstraction and temporality and allowing it to be a tool for our communities to truly imagine towards the future. And what that means for me is that Yolande has spent almost 30 years combing through the archives and compiling the stories that have been lost or intentionally buried from us, erased, and she has uncovered them through forms of mapping, sculpture work, and abstract film. And in conversation with her and in working with her over the past year and a half, what I've noticed in her work, and what I've even noticed in my own framework and my own thinking, is that she has kind of lifted that labor of research and archival so that we don't have to expend our imagination and fabulation on the past, and we can keep our imaginative reserve for the practices of the future. And I think that that work, she deserves her flowers for that, and everyone who is working in that type of archival and preservation space in an abstract and fine art way, they all deserve their flowers, because we're in a very beautiful and critical time that now we can use our imaginative battery, our imaginative practices to start to truly build something new. And I think that's what we see in your work. So we had such a good bio.
No bio.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't have to do it again.
I think, thank you.
I think where you've left us is talking about just the two
Title?
futures space-time framework.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know what you just said about being able to work on the future and not look back to the past. For me, this type of work, I have been looking at the past, but always trying to get to the future. So I'm looking at, traces in history, but I'm very much thinking about how we can make change for the future, to make, just kind of make a better future, to maybe shift the way things are going toward a better future. And one of the things about this show, which I think is really incredible for me, is, I started this work with a question in like 1990, I don't know, 7 or 8, and I was looking at, there was a lot of research about representations of Blackness and in critical studies and art, but not much in architecture, which is my field that I'm trained in, and so I basically, it was in an essay where I wrote about archetypes of Black males and Black females, and then kind of took the question of Blackness and what does it mean in terms of occupying space. And it was really just a question. I didn't have answers at that time, and so I've basically been kind of following this question in the work that I've been doing. And this show is amazing because I feel like, not that I've answered the question, but that all the different, I don't know, it's like the body of the question is the work that's on display. And it takes many forms. So one form is mapping, one form is object making, another form, more recent form, is working with video, and also like collaging, lots of collaging and working with layers in all of these different media. But I'm really excited to be at Art and Practice and CAM, and to show this work. I worked with sound for the first time, working with really amazing sound artists, which Zion had to kind of prod me because the videos were about silence, and silence for me does have noise, and so what Cody, the sound artist, and I were able to do is like explore the kind of sonic dimensions of silence in a way, and that's really amazing. I feel like that and the video work, it's just kind of opened things up in this, just in this show, things opened up for me in a really wonderful way, at the same time that I'm answering questions that I've been looking at for a long time.
And to add to that, when we're thinking about kind of what was the path that we took to curate all the different pieces that Yolande has made over the past 30 plus years. What I appreciated was her visibilizing of space-time. And space-time is a theory and understanding that whenever you're speaking of a temporal plane, it's an acceptance that the past, present, and future are multi-directional, layered, and kind of happening on top of themselves. And that plane in itself is a spatial grid. So the idea of time and space are always connected. So I see that in the ghost maps. I see that in your film work. I also see that in the creation of the dictionary plates. And what I also deeply appreciate, in essence, with abstract female artists is folks who dare to question precedent and folks who dare to poke at the tools that really shape and are the architectural drivers of our everyday lives. And I will say specifically for this show, Yolande looks at the idea of cartography, map making, and the map itself and says, well, why does it have to be that way? And, you know, she thinks about the echo of the precedent that we live under in regards to how we understand a map and how we read a map. She does the same thing for language, or this idea of the dictionary, this practice of defining what happens when you have a word. Someone has made the definition for the word, and we live in the echo of the precedent of that definition forever. We don't really ask the question of why, or we don't ask the question of what is the process of defining or building that type of book. And then she wraps all of this type of inquiry, this practice of refusal, and a pushing even of the question of time. And I just think it's really impressive, and I appreciate artists who, you know, take the time to ask questions of these kind of tools connected to white supremacy and colonialism and this type of patriarchal power dynamic. It's a very brave act. So
I want to talk about timelines.
yes.
Because the timelines are the spine of all the Black City projects. And they basically consist of social customs as well as laws. So social customs which have the weight of laws and actual laws, which are mapped in the context of just world events, because of course they impact things. So every edition of a city that I work on, and I started the Los Angeles edition in 2019 when I came here. I was teaching at USC. I was also working on a exhibition, Reconstructions, Architecture, and Blackness. And the city I chose was Los Angeles. I was like moving and living in Los Angeles. And so every city starts with its founding. So it starts with the founding of the city, and then it kind of goes forward. The founding of Los Angeles is interesting because there's like the founding of Los Angeles as an American state, 1850, but then it actually was founded prior to that in 1781 when it was the Los Pobladores who came from Spain to settle, and then it was founded even before that in a 16th century novel, not Los Angeles specifically, but California, where the island of California was kind of dreamed up by a 16th century author in Spain. And each of those stories actually has a kind of Black presence in it. So the 16th century novel is based on an Amazonian queen, Khalifa, who's the queen of the island California, and that's where the name comes from. So following traces of African origin in California actually led me to Calafia in Spain. And then the pobladores, they also had mixed an African origin, and then kind of coming to 1850 to like the founding of the American state, and its founding as a free state, but with the condition that the fugitive slave law was adopted. So the founding of California easily entered the research I was doing in a historical sense, and that's kind of what I'm tracking in the timeline. I'm also tracking, in addition to things that have maybe more to do with civil rights, tracking things that have to do with spatial rights, like housing laws, and this country has a history of laws that actually affected who could occupy which spaces, and so spatial rights as well as civil rights, and then just the shape. So in the maps, like the shape of settlement is kind of impacted by these laws and customs in California, and specifically it's racial covenants and mortgages and deeds that have restricted up until mid-20th century most of the city for people who are non-white. And so the maps kind of track it in one way, the timeline tracks this in another way, the dictionary plates also track it in a more personal way through these amazing stories about placemaking and resilience and resistance in the fabric of the city. Well, Calafia is one of the plates, but then, because that's an origin myth of California, but the others are like specific places, and the dictionary plates in the A&P CAM installation are three-dimensional. It's the first time I've made them three-dimensional. They were two-dimensional plates before, modeled after medieval illuminated manuscripts, medieval prayer plates, which had an image, which was a depiction of the trials of a particular saint, and then a story about those trials and the saint below it. And they usually had some kind of floral calligraphy surrounding it. And so I just very much kind of took that pattern and made a two-dimensional plate. I was also thinking about dictionaries and how, like illustrated dictionaries. I had one when I was a kid. I remembered with the pictures.
They took the pictures out. They took the pictures out of our dictionary.
Well, no, now they're color, which I don't like as much. I liked the drawn, printed ones, but they're photographs now when I've seen them. But anyway, so it was kind of playing with that and commemorating these places in the installation. You kind of enter into a field of these, memorial plates in a sense.
Can we start the, because I want to have the Kaye block, which is this object, the sculptural piece that Yolande has constructed, and it is an abstracted aspect of the Calle de los Negros, which is a map that you'll see upon entering in the main gallery. And if we can...
This is the map.
Okay, so here's a map.
The Calle is extracted from that blue area. That's the 19th century extent of Los Angeles. And the blue was the Puebla area, which is where Calle de los Negros was. Calle de los Negros was the name before American statehood. After American statehood, it became Nigger Alley. And looking in maps, it's very close to where Pico House is. It's like Pico House, it's on the, like a block on the corner. And it's where the first Chinatown actually was there. That same street, it's a street where minorities lived in the 1800s. It's where the 1871 massacre happened of the Chinese. Right now, it's an extension of Los Angeles Street, so at some point in history, like looking at maps, the name of the street would change. Sometimes the whole name was dropped off of a map. It didn't appear at all. Then Los Angeles Street kind of was extended to it. Chinatown itself was removed because of during the construction for Union Station, they leveled Chinatown, the first Chinatown. So if you go there now, you see Los Angeles Street and a kind of green area and parking, a little plot and parking. But yeah, it's actually a very historic area, but what you see is absence. And so the Calle block is kind of showing the layers of history, but also showing the absence, which over time, it's absent now, but it wasn't in the past, and so it kind of shows it as a form. It also shows the forces that kind of impact that form, like the 10 freeway kind of coming and basically like rupturing areas, the way the Puebla was separated from the rest of the growing city and kind of frozen in time. So the Calle block, it's extracted from the map, and it's bracketed by the timeline on either side, and the movements that you see in it are essentially a kind of push and pull between forces that are promoting freedom and forces that take freedom away.
And how many have you seen the block? I don't know how
So
many.
this is it
Okay.
right now.
If we're looking at it, oh great. If we're looking at it right now, especially the image that's on the right side of the screen, you'll see these waves that Yolande is referring to, this kind of push and pull wave pattern. And it is just that. It's a timeline starting from the 1860s where you can see patterns of laws that quote unquote had a positive effect on housing rights, specifically for everybody, but then we're looking at it in relationship to Black, brown, and indigenous folks. And then when you see the wave curve back in, that's where there was some sort of backlash. That's when there was already some sort of response. And when you're looking at the timeline in detail, hopefully when you go over there and check it out, then you have this beautiful scaled contextual understanding of what was happening culturally during that time of the push and pull, then what was happening in a civil rights understanding, and what was happening in a federal understanding. What I love about the shape itself, and you're going to hear me talk about extraction a lot, because I think it's really important for us to, bring abstraction back into all of our practices, is that in the form, if you just erase the timeline, if you erase the colors, if you were just to trace that form as an abstract pattern, that is the visualization of this type of violence against our communities. And I think that's really important. And I also think, in essence, she's also pushing back at the idea that laws themselves are facts. Actually, laws are fairly abstract. And I think, even these ideas and these words, this idea of redlining and all of these terms that we're using, they're all abstract. The difference is there is a specific system and an ideology held up by white supremacy that says that these are facts, and there's a lot of definitions and then practices around these ideas that don't let them move out of anything except for what they are, which is abstract ideas. So again, when I'm looking at Yolande's practice, constantly moving what some people might say are undeniable facts into the abstract is a really beautiful practice that you uphold. And you just noted absence, and I'd love for you to define for everybody and within your practice what the aesthetic of absence is, because I think that's also a really beautiful through line.
I actually want to talk about like when you're looking at the Cahiers block and there's the pattern of the waves, but so there are like aha moments in the projects, and one of the aha moments for me was making the timeline and seeing, and this is like the timeline for the US and California, but mostly the kind of global, like not global, but national timeline, seeing the 1870s Reconstruction era and seeing all of the civil rights laws that were passed, like this kind of like opening of freedom in the Reconstruction era after the Civil War. And then when Lincoln is assassinated and things shift toward the South kind of regaining, I don't know, not necessarily its position, but just regaining the tools to like control history. Then there's 100 years of like, and you see it visually, so the timeline shows this, 100 years of nothing, of like there are laws actually, they're more like codes, like black codes, and they're not like official laws, but they're the social codes that then restrict the kind of ability for African Americans to like fully realize themselves. And we call this the Jim Crow era, which is a euphemism for like things we can't talk about. But when you look at it, like just when you visually see these, and I just represent it as lines, so you see the lines which are, laws that are making people free, that are helping people self-actualize, and then you see like laws that go in the other direction that are negative, and then you see nothing until 1960. Then you start to see like 1963, 64, 65, the laws start being made and the lines are there. And that's a pattern. And then when I was working on the astrolabe, what was really interesting was that I was looking at the the context of Africa and the African diaspora and African colonization, not American colonization. And so then that map started at 17. In the 1760s, there's, and I don't remember the exact dates, but there's the Haitian Revolution, American Revolution, French Revolution. I'm not saying them in order, but I do think the Haitian Revolution, I don't remember which is first, but those three revolutions happen in the 1760s. So that's like 100 years earlier where you have, this kind of move toward freedom again. And so for me, like finding these larger patterns, like there's an aspect of the work where I'm working at different scales and looking at things either like zoomed in or zoomed out. And depending on the scale that you look at something, you may not actually see anything. So sometimes you have to zoom in to see it. Other times you have to zoom out. When you zoom out, you see larger patterns. And so part of my work is just trying to visualize that so that others can see it. I want to see it myself, but I actually think it's really important I want young people to see it. I want, in all the work that I'm doing, I want them to know these stories and to see the, like they're not all positive, but at the same time, they can see the resistance and the struggle and actually like feel empowered. And so that's really important for me in the work. Yeah. But you asked me a specific question.
I mean, now we're not
I
going to
had
go
my
in order.
own question I wanted to answer, but you were asking me about absence, and so so I've been basically like just the question of African American history. I think like at the moment that we're in now, there are quite a few people who are, you know, who have unearthed the past, who are, like, we can't say that in an American context that we have no history, but I actually grew up when I was young where, you know, I was told there was no history, like in a class in college. Like even for Africa, I had one teacher who's, you know, who refused actually to, anthropology class, refused to accept that, you know, that we originated from Africa in an anthropology class. And he said this out loud. But anyway, I digress again. But like just trying, so this idea of trying to give presence to absence, you know, part of it is historic absence, but then it's also the absence in the physical environment that we inhabit. And and so, you know, just part of what I do is like just try to look through documents like maps, or, you know, look in books. You know, part of my influence has been from cultural studies, critical studies, places where they're actually expanding what you would consider as a resource or an archive to try to find out about, you know, the past. And so, so I've used fiction or you know, books as well as maps to try to trace a presence, you know, from the past. And I'm talking a lot about the past.
We love it, but I want to add to, with like the lens of art, this lens of fine art, and this aesthetic of absence. I think it's, and even to my original comment of like, what does it look like when artists are starting to center some of their work and refusing ideas of precedent or ideas that have held precedent. We understand, and I think, or hopefully we all understand, and we're all familiar with the practice of erasure. And what's happening right now, they're doing a really good job actively erasing a lot of important information. And I think what Yolande is doing in her work is using erasure still as a practice and as a tool, but flipping it on its head, because she is bringing in this story, the etymology of California, that is linked to a 15th, 16th century romantic novel made by the Spaniards that is centered on a black woman. And the moment that you realize that California was named after a black woman, it erases whatever history that you thought you had about the state. So this idea of even practicing erasure in a way that uplifts and that actually uncovers is, I think, amazing. And I would say the same in your map making. The map making is erasing the already erased history. The map making itself is erasing our idea and our approach to how you read a map when she layers over, 200 years over one city block. She is erasing immediately our invitation towards map making, and when then she takes the map and puts it into a body, into a form, into a sculpture, and allows for us to then say, what is the scale with which we can best understand these 100-year patterns and push and pulls? She's also saying, I'm going to then erase the patterns that have already been erased from us to uncover then the stories that should help us reimagine and redevelop. What does a city look like that can't be bombed? What does the development of a city look like that can't be redlined? If we understand, what the ideas and the precedents of even these decisions were made and how they were made in the first place. And I think that invitation again of just poking at the obvious, like just taking the tools that are constantly being used against us and saying, maybe the tools themselves aren't bad, but how do we reimagine and kind of abstract the tools for our own growth, for our own self-determination, for our futurity. I also would love for you to talk about the negative monument.
Yeah, well, that's tied to trying to give presence to absence. And so I actually wrote an essay about the negative monument. The idea of the negative monument was not like my own. It came from a theorist, Alois Riegel, who wrote about who kind of first theorized about it, but what I was interested in was this kind of space of absence that actually was full, like a space of absence that was full of stuff that had presence. And so, you know, a lot of what we take for absence is the same thing about silence, like in the videos, where like silence is not really silent, absence is not really absent, and so yeah, like I've actually really been resisting monuments and monumentalization, or and just kind of because I've really been dealing with lack, like the lack of monumentalization, the lack of, but not to try to fill it with something. So in a way, the dictionary plates for me, it's interesting when I talk about them, I think of them as memorial plaques. So that's kind of like a kind of monument. It is a monument, which I've kind of sort of moved toward in this practice of like negation. Like the negation, I think, has been a negative thing, but then, as with many things in African American culture where you take something negative and you make it a positive, that was kind of how I see, like that's how I see the practice with absence and with, you know, making it present or giving it a body, yeah.
That ties into, so in the back room, there's a 2-channel films, and that's where the score by Cody Perkins lives. And connected to the second channel of the film is the Unmonument, which is the exquisite corpse, and that is kind of part of this larger 6-city traveling fugitive practice that was created by the Black Reconstruction Collective, and I was invited to curate this multi-city exhibition. And what the Unmonument does is it also pokes at what does a monument do. You know, it's usually static. It also concretizes an idea or a set of ideas, a definition, a name, a place, and a time. In one object, it holds this idea of this temporal, spatial story that is really never questioned. It just kind of sits in front of you. It also doesn't have a lot of language around it. It just has shape. And somehow we can all orient, or there's a trust that people can orient around this object and agree with it and within our towns. So the exquisite corpse, which is nothing but an industrial lift, is traveled to 6 cities and held by different architects. Lake was one of the architects in Brooklyn. You know, it started in Chicago with Amanda Williams and Mitch McEwen, and each artist gets to telescope and fabricate and add on to this monument. And it's not, the object itself is not important, actually. You know, it's not the point of the practice, but the movement of this object is the most important part. The fugitivity of the object, the shrouding of the object, and then the location with which it lands. And it always lands in these quote-unquote black cities. And then what then gets pulled from these black cities through the unmonument. And I'll add another layer that the Exquisite Corpse is technically, it's a surrealist game. And what it looks like is you're usually given like an object, or you get a piece of paper and you fold it 3 ways, and somebody gets to draw something on the top part, you don't see it, somebody draws in the middle, you don't see it, somebody draws in the bottom, and you unravel it and you have this completed image. So there's this playfulness in this practice as well of you might not know what has been made before you, and you can't quite predict what is going to compile this image or this drawing, but what we can all agree on is that it's interconnected and that it's fully impacted. So each one of these artists don't get to see what happens to the object prior to them. It just arrives, and that's what was fun with Yolande. Just kind of arrived in LA, and she was like, "Oh, it's bigger than I thought it was." She's like, "Oh, it has a booth on it." There's all these beautiful stories that get connected to this piece, and I think that's also a brave part of this type of practice, especially when you're dealing with things that have been so concretized. When you're looking at sandborn maps, you're looking at maps in general, you're looking at definitions. Where's the space where we can be very, very imaginative and playful with these ideas? And again, I think you've done a great job.
I'm going to talk about my reaction to the unmonument, because so it's very, it is industrial, it's very skeletal, and I wanted to kind of make it volumetric, and basically shrouded it, and was considering it kind of like a body. Maybe it's a little bit like the Calais block, in that I wanted to, just kind of turn it into a volumetric form, and then use a screen. It has a capacity to project a screen as this eye that I would project out of. And so when you see the installation in the video gallery, there are 2 screens which are facing each other, one which is on the wall, the other which is on this object, which is shrouded in black burlap, kind of thinking about, my references were death shrouds and kind of wrapping bodies in fabric, and then it's bound with a very happy blue cord, and then that cord is bound in a way that it's kind of playing off the patterns that are in the diagrams of theories of relativity, so diagrams that are exploring past, present, and future, but then also diagrams that are the Islamic patterns that are around the dictionary plates. So it's wrapping the unmonument and then kind of unspooling across the space, and so you kind of enter into its web. And then there are these 4 silent meditations, 1 on the future, futurity, and 3 which are kind of telling a story of a story about Los Angeles, but also just a story about Black cities in general, from the origin to the present. And the 2 are like ricocheting and in conversation with each other, where at some points the ideas about futurity and relativity kind of migrate to reconstruction, reparation, and abolition, the meditations on that, and then those migrate over to futurity. And so in that room, in that space, I think that's where everything kind of really comes together. It's, on the one hand, it's the research for all of the work which is in the main gallery, just a lot of the background for it. But then it has the images of that work there as well. But then it also has this, it's kind of, you get engulfed in the space-time matrix because of the way the two videos are competing with each other, but also just kind of drawing you in the cycle of like past and present and future. So I hope you get to see it if you haven't.
And I want to add, a lot of this is complicated by design. So there is the invitation is to really slow down. On all of Yolande's work, the titles of the films were a meditation on. So I just want to, and also invite that into your practice, into your day-to-day life. A lot of the questions that we're starting to ask ourselves, a lot of the protections that we thought we had are starting to dismantle rapidly. And I think that again, if we're thinking about this kind of space-time understanding and how time and space are in constant connection, we do have an invitation to slow down and try to study as much as possible. And I think this exhibition invites people to see other ways where folks are practicing refusal. In Yolande's work, this idea of just asking, like, well, why do you think you're looking at a map? And why do you think when you see a timeline, you're looking at a date in the past? And why do you think when you see a word that's defined, that definition is true, right? Like, just really simple, slow, meditative ways for us to start to really push into something new, imagining something new. And I just wanted to name that these maps, the design of the maps, the design of the dictionary, the design of the clock was not really made for Black, Brown, and Indigenous self-autonomy and determination. Like, it's pretty intentional for folks to not know how to read a map. So for Yolande and her architectural practice to allow for that literacy to exist in abstraction, to allow for it to exist just in form and pattern and in story, because Black, brown people are storytellers, like that is truly a gift. And I'm unbelievably grateful for the 30 plus years of work that you've done to compile all of these stories that you've had to detach from other people's stories, other people's maps, the stories and journals and archives. Like, she was deep. All these things that weren't digitized, right? Like, so
I'd also like to say, like, all the work there, I had a lot of help. So the teams are quite large. Like some of the work, there's a small gallery which has a video, the video from the Venice Biennale project that I did in 2023. It's a very large construction that is a space-time construct that you move through, that as you get to the end, there are 25 narratives of African diasporan women. The video for that, which was the first video I made, ends with yesterday a Black woman went to the future and here she stands today. And I actually kind of took that from the film that's in the large video gallery, but personalized it, through like female identity, my own, through the narratives. That video was a different kind of space-time construct, but there's this like triangulation that happened in the space where you have time on one side, space on another side. Space would be cities where the events when the timeline happened. And then the women who, of course, lived in the cities and were affected by the events. So there's this kind of triangulation of events that happen that, they're positioned within. But in essence, we're all positioned within, this, like we all have our own narratives, our personal narratives, our, family narratives, and we are kind of in that triangulated space as well of, place and whatever kind of laws are at play.
There's one last piece that we didn't mention that I just want to drop in when y'all take the time to go to the exhibit is, and you'll find this specifically in the Kaye block and also in the back room between the 2-channel film, is in the pattern that you'll see in this sculptural object when you find that these kind of positive rights or laws that support homesteading and this type of self-determination, whenever you find a moment for these laws to kind of come back into place, it's always after groups of riots. So I think that's very interesting when you kind of see this pattern of like chunks of rioting that happen and then kind of the responses that happen to rioting. And in the film, she's done a very beautiful job of also curating images of riots that happened across North America, and it's just an invitation here when we're trying to make this ode to the future, trying to imagine how are we kind of mapping and building and writing and kind of creating the longitude and latitude between where we exist in the present and the future. I'm curious, and this is just what I'm getting from your work, what kind of riot do we need to imagine that can't be thwarted by laws? Like what is a new form, just like we're looking at a new form of a map, like what is a new form of a riot? Because the riot really is the tool and response that holds both space and time, all the time. So it's just been really impressive to see that kind of unlocked in this scaled timeline, and it was just refreshing. So I just really hope y'all take the time to look through this Kaye block. It's so refreshing to see the patterns and to really see what was working for groups of people, and then also to be reminded that we've just been in a cycle. So because we're coming up to another 100 years, we really do have an opportunity to say these are the things that happened in the past, this is how they were thwarted, this is how the federal and state levels have thwarted all of our decisions, all of our good ideas. How do we kind of game plan ahead of it? How do we start to get, if they have the patterns, we can predict their patterns just as much as they think they can predict ours.
But we have to acknowledge that it is a repeating pattern. And the video in the large gallery ends with the executive orders that are being passed today, which many of them are actually removing laws that were passed in the 60s. So, things like Medicare, Social Security, desiring to remove them, Head Start. One of the things that was interesting to me is that they're relatively recent, that they were extended to Americans as a whole. So, laws that were passed in 64, 65, 66, like that's when women had rights, so when African Americans got rights, many other people also got rights, like everyone's lives got better. And a lot of these like recent executive orders, they're not just touching the most recent kind of DEI rules or whatever. They're actually going all the way back to the 60s and attacking the things that improved a lot of people's lives back then. it basically made our lives what they are today. And that's one of the things that, really came home to me and like making the video, actually, like seeing, well, these laws were passed here, and that's not that long ago. That's like when I was born or whatever, impacted my life and those around me, and now we have someone who's actually trying to take those away. So, but you first have to see that and understand it, and then I think in general it helps you orient yourself and decide what you're going to do, like how you can combat it. It's important. So I think we're at time.
We are. I'd like to just thank Yolande and Zion for this incredible conversation. If you'd like to stay behind for a little and speak with them until we close the space, you're welcome to do so. Please also visit our new bookstore downstairs and patronize them. We are so happy to have them with us. Thank you again, and we hope you visit the exhibition very soon. Have a good night.